Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming. We're very honored to have a very distinguished speaker, Ray Williams. Ray's going to be speaking about colonial paper tonight and having fun ways of collecting colonial paper. Thank you for coming.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some of my fun in the hobby. The purpose of my talk tonight is to show you several different ways of collecting colonial paper money, to share some really cool examples I happen to own, and maybe pique your interest in maybe getting a little something colonial in your personal collections at home. I know some of you by face, a couple by name, but how many people here are A&A members? Oh, good turnout. And A&S? C4? EAC? Okay, wonderful. AARP? Except Teddy. Okay, good. Awesome. I started collecting colonial paper money, I guess about 10 years ago. I was visiting a friend's house, and above his fireplace was this really cool frame with a picture in the center and one bill for each of the 13 colonies around it. And I said, I can do something like that. That's in my budget. And I figured that it would probably take me 2 or 3 years to complete that collection. And that was about right. My very last purchase was a bill from Georgia. The 2 expensive colonies or states are New Hampshire and Georgia. Now keep in mind that Vermont was not one of the original 13 colonies. Fortunately for me, because I could not afford anything from Vermont. It's, you're talking 5 figures, for anything that's a complete bill or more. There's just not that much of it. They're very rare. And in the process of doing that, you can't just get 13 bills. In the process of looking, you see something and say, well, that's cool, I have to have it. Or that's in the dealer's case and it's too cheap. It has no right sitting there, it belongs at my house, and it comes home with me. And so after a period of time, you accumulate more and more bills. The Bible for collecting colonial money is Eric Newman's book, The Early Paper Money of America. And this has pretty much everything in it that you're going to want to know. But there's never everything in a book. There's always good research you can continue to do, things to be updated. This is the 5th edition. I understand that this will be the last paper copy. This is available on the secondary market. It's also available online at the Newman Numismatic portal. So if you wanted to look a few things up, you can go right there to look it up. I'm hoping, I understand that the Newman portal is going to be updating the book in the future. So as more images come up, they can put an indefinite amount of images online that you can't do in a paper copy because of costs. So it's something I'm really looking forward to in the future. There's another book out by Freeburg that lists all paper money, including colonials, and that makes a good checklist. Most of the slabbing services will give you a Freeburg number for the bill that you have. If it's a state bill, we'll give the 2 digits of the state and a number, which is the chronological and denominational sequence of the bills. And if it's Continental Currency, it will say CC in the number. You'll see some of those in a little while. Okay. I'm going to go right to the fun part and start talking about the Colonial Bills. I'm going to be projecting actual bills up on the screen. This is not a PowerPoint program. Because my back may be towards some of you, if you have a question or something, just shout it out. If you can't hear me for some reason, shout it out and I'll speak louder. And I'll do my best to answer your questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. If I don't know the answer, I will find out, and if there is an answer, I will get back to you. Just let me know after the talk's over, but please ask questions.
Question.
Yeah.
Get you started here. How much difference is there between those 5 editions of the book that you just mentioned?
Well, the big difference is that they're priced, and when you get a commercial entity pricing a book, it changes every year. And I use the pricing in these as just a rough guide as to rarity. I try to get my prices for colonial paper money based on what I see in auctions or on eBay or actual transactions dealer to customer at home conventions. So that's a big difference. But there is more information, more and more every year, updated. Eric, I worked with Eric on the 5th edition for a couple little things, and as improvements came about, they were incorporated into the newer editions. But the basic information in the earlier editions is still mostly good information.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, the first colonial paper money, first paper money in the Eastern world was put out by the colony of Massachusetts, and that was in 1690. Everything I'm going to show you tonight is real, except for 2 or 3 items which are photocopies. This is a photocopy of the bill. I cannot afford this bill and stay happily married at the same time. This is extremely rare. December 10th, 1690. The series of paper money was authorized to pay for a military expedition that failed in Canada. Hi, Garrett.
Hi.
Garrett was with me this past summer at the A&H Summer Seminar, and we both took a course on colonial paper money. And we had a blast. I highly recommend going out there to anybody that can do it. Okay, back to the bill. So this was the very first appearance of paper money, 1690 in Massachusetts. Shortly after, the other colonies followed suit. Help if I brought my notes over so I stay in order. Okay, Maryland, all the colonial paper money was denominated in pounds, shillings, and pence until 1767. The only exception to this was in 1709 in New York. And again, this is a photocopy. Same reason as before. This is from New York, and this is denominated in lion dollars. You'll see here, this bill is worth 13 ounces and 3/4 of plate, which is silver, or 20 lion dollars. So with that exception, everything else was pounds, shillings, and pence, until Maryland issued their money. In 1767. This is a $6 bill. It is difficult to find a bill of this date in very nice shape. They were well circulated, and many of them were canceled, so it's hard to come by. This is probably average condition for what you will find in the market for sale. There's Death to Counterfeit, which you see on the bottom left, and printed by Jonas Green. You can collect bills with famous signers. And if you really think about it, every bill was signed by hand, and every one of those people were very respectable citizens. They didn't just go to the local pub and give some drunk a cool pen and have them sign these things. These were respectable people in their different colonies. But there's some people more famous than others. The center signature is John Hart. He was one of New Jersey's representatives, and he signed the Declaration of Independence. This is dated March 25th, 1776, and on the back is a nature print, and this was developed by Ben Franklin, where an actual leaf was taken from nature to make this print, or to make this printing block, and the veins in the leaf are like a fingerprint. It's impossible to draw them exactly. So it's an anti-counterfeiting device, which we'll get into later. And this was printed by Isaac Collins in Burlington, New Jersey. And we have the bottom signature is Francis Hopkinson, and he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And the top signature there is Hendrik Fisher. Anybody ever hear of Hendrik Fisher before? He was a delegate to the Stamp Act Congress when the colonies got together to decide what they were going to do about what they considered to be the unfair taxation of the Stamp Act. And that was in 1765, the Stamp Act Congress. And here we have a signature of David Brearley from New Jersey, and he signed the Constitution. And regardless how you stand politically, he was one of the people instrumental in getting equal representation for the smaller states. So if our government were run strictly by population, during colonial times it would have been New York and Boston running the entire 13 colonies. Pretty much like today, if our votes were just popular votes, it would be New York and California running the country. But the smaller states get their say, like Delaware and New Jersey. New Jersey in the time period was pretty much just a piece of land to help you get from New York to Philadelphia. On the
Right.
Yes,
That said Spanish on there, like the second line?
yes. Spanish milled dollars. These dollars, we didn't have a mint yet, not until 1792. So these dollars, $20 were 20 Spanish milled dollars. And the last that I am sharing with signatures is James Jarvis. This person was one of the people who were partners in the company for coining coppers, and they were responsible for making the Connecticut coppers in Connecticut. James Jarvis also received the contract from the government for making Fugio coppers, and that was a big debacle, and he lost, well, he didn't lose, but I think that he used a lot of the government's copper, something like 30 tons of it, that was supposed to go into Fugios. His organization made Connecticut coppers instead. But that right there is a whole talk unto itself. It would make a great soap opera if someone were so inclined. These bills that I'm showing you all have anti-counterfeiting measures to one extent or another. For instance, this is an indented bill from New Hampshire. You'll see that the edges, top, bottom, and right side are cut pretty much flat, and the left side has a wave to it. What they did is on the left-hand side, when these were printed, was an extension that would be in a notebook. And the serial number placed on this bill was also placed on that extension. This wavy line cut into there, so that when this was redeemed, they would compare this note to the stub, and if the line matched, you would get reimbursed. If it didn't match, it would be a counterfeit. This was one anti-counterfeiting measure. Another measure was using different color inks. This 3-pound bill of March 1776 in New Jersey uses a blue outer border and red, and then the back of the bill is a standard black. And this also uses, I don't know if I can get it here in the light, but they're mica flakes. You can see one of them right there is pretty prominent, but with the lighting in the camera, I can't really get it to show that well. But there are mica flakes in this paper. And the same printing press that made the paper money, they would also make these blue counterfeit detectors. There's no serial number, no signatures, you couldn't spend them, but companies that did a lot of transactions could obtain these bills, and then they could compare what was offered to them in commerce with these blue counterfeit detectors, and they had to match exactly. If they didn't match exactly, then it was counterfeit. And counterfeiting was a big problem back in those days. And China's making it a big problem today. And that's both the front and the back were on the counterfeit detectors. Those are all fun to see as you collect and assemble sets of bills. Besides the 13 colonies, you also had the Continental Congress. And that is just such a fascinating series. Everything issued by the Continental Congress was in denominations of $1. This is a fractional bill of February 1776, 1/6 of $1. And here's another one, 1/3 of $1. And we have half $1 and 2/3 of $1. Anybody want to guess, besides the Stitleys, why these weird denominations are on here? Okay, if you think about it, we didn't have actual dollars at the time. Now, the mint wasn't developed. We had the Spanish milled dollar, which is what this is. But the Spanish milled dollar, that was 8 reals. So why don't they have it in 1/8, 1/4, 1/2? Why are they doing it in thirds and 1/6 of $1? That's because 1/6 of a Spanish milled dollar was equal to a shilling. And if you notice in the vignette here, there's one circle. 1/3 of $1 would equal 2 shillings, and you have 2 circles. A half $1 would be 3 shillings, 3 circles, and 2/3 of $1 would be 4 shillings, and you have 4 circles there. So a lot of times there are weird denominations of state and continental currency, and there was a reason for most of them, and a lot of the reasons I don't know. But this one happens to make sense. There were a number of different issues of the Continental Congress. Here's one, $8 from May of 1775, going chronologically. Here's $6 from November of 1775. Every denomination had a different vignette on it, and the Latin legend to it and the picture of the vignette aren't always obvious as to what they mean, but in the books you can find out, and it's fun to learn about. But this was November 1775. We already did February of 76. This is May 76. All these are in Philadelphia. There's another $4 from July 1776 in Philadelphia. And here's November 1776 in Philadelphia. Now, what's happening in November, December of 1776? The British Army is crossing New Jersey from New York to occupy Trenton. And the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia didn't know what was going to happen, because Washington, until the Battle of Trenton, didn't have much success in stopping the British Army. So what the Congress did is they skedaddled to Baltimore. And this was authorized February of 1777. And while they're in Baltimore, of course, Washington was successful in defeating the British and the Hessians in Trenton, the Battle of Princeton, and the Continental Congress felt that they weren't threatened anymore, so they went back to Philadelphia. Then the British eventually came back to Philadelphia from the south and took it over, and again the Continental Congress skedaddled, this time to Yorktown. Yorktown is not Virginia, this is actually York, Pennsylvania. The Continental Congress actually went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania for a day or two, and then figured they'd be much safer on the other side of the river. So they crossed the river and set up shop in Yorktown, in April of 1778. Once the British left permanently Philadelphia, the Continental Congress came back again. They issued more money, authorized in September of 1778. And then the last issue of Continental currency was authorized January of 1779. Now, the Continental Congress had to flee again, but this time it was not because of the British, it was because of the American soldiers wanting to get paid. And the Army guys are not fun to be around when they have not been paid and they don't get mail call. But those are all examples of Continental currency. A very economical way to collect is getting repaired or canceled bills. Let's see. This 1767 bill from Maryland is what they call a pin note. And if you look in the center, the paper in those days did not hold up like nowadays. And if you folded it back and forth a couple dozen times, it was going to tear in half. This tore in half, and some household pins were used to pin it back together to keep it in circulation. And those pins are really kind of cool if you look at them under a microscope and how they're made, handmade, that they're not machine produced like today. And there are certain characteristics you can tell an original pin from something that somebody used today to keep one put together. But, and that one, I think I paid $60 for. Might have actually been at one of your shows. This particular bill is really cool. It's, if you notice in the center, it's been sewn together to keep it intact because of its split. On the back, somebody took a piece of scrap paper that was some type of legal document from 1769. They glued it to the back to give it rigidity to keep it together. Then they trimmed the sides because it was ragged. A real note is going to be the size of that one to the right. That's how much it's been trimmed down. And then I have to take the note out to show you the bill. The final insult to the bill was a slice cancel. That slice right there canceled the bill. It was taken out of circulation, and whoever had it hopefully got some good silver for it. The bill I compared size-wise is a Connecticut bill, and this is hole canceled. So when it left circulation, they put big holes in it so that nobody would accept it again. And Massachusetts, that's another type of cancellation. And New Jersey had the most efficient cancellation. They just burned it when it was turned in. So you can't collect canceled bills from New Jersey. I've never seen one anyway. But repaired bills are something you can do very economically. Besides famous signers, there's also famous printers and engravers. Here's a bill from Delaware, and January 1776, 5 shilling bill, and on the back, you'll see that this was printed by James Adams. He was a former Franklin employee and famous for his work as a printer in Delaware. I don't think there were many printers. There might have been one or two besides him, but he was a famous one from 1776. And in New Jersey, I think this is the oldest bill that I have, 1756. And you have printed by James Parker. He was actually printer to the king. And again, he was employed at some point. He had communications with Ben Franklin using his nature print design. The next New Jersey bill, this one's February of 76. printed by Isaac Collins, and Isaac Collins printed the first family Bible in America. He also printed a famous history of the colonial period in book form, and he was pretty prolific, nothing like Franklin and Hall, but he did a lot of work. And this bill is sewn back together. This is from Massachusetts, and December 1775, 4 shillings 6 pence, and this is the famous Sword in Hand Bill, issued in defense of American liberty. And if you look at what the soldier's holding, he has a scroll that says Magna Carta on it. I got out of sequence. Here we go. Okay. A year later, after this bill was issued, this is a photocopy because the real thing is out of my price range. The scroll now says independence. We gave up on our desire to have our rights as expressed by the Magna Carta. We were fed up. We wanted independence now. It was too late to try to make good. So this was in November of 1776. And as bills printed by famous engravers and printers, this was a Paul Revere bill.
That was printed by him.
No, I'm sorry, the plates were engraved by Paul Revere. Some of his copper plates still exist. And this is a Rising Sun bill. Also, the copper plate for the obverse of this was engraved, or the front of this was engraved by Paul Revere. And this is a codfish note. Codfish was a big export in colonial times. You always hear about tobacco and beaver pelts. You don't hear too much about codfish, but that's a codfish up there in the top center, 1778. And then the last one that I'll show would be a Pennsylvania bill of 1764. And this was printed by Ben Franklin and David Hall. Now, at this point in time, in 1764, Franklin wasn't getting his hands dirty. I believe he was in England at the time, representing the United States. But David Hall was back doing the work and giving Franklin his portion. Now, you could also collect battles, Revolutionary War battles that are pictured on colonial currency. And it's a very short set. It's only one bill. So this is the only one you need for a complete set. This is South Carolina, 10 shillings of Waffle money, April 1778. It's uniface, so there's nothing on the back. And it's known as a palmetto bill because of the palm tree. But if you look closely at this palm tree, on the left you can see the flag of South Carolina with the half moon, and this is Fort Sullivan here firing on the British Navy, and the Navy is here. You can see the masts and the flags off the masts, and they're firing at Fort Sullivan. Now, in school I never learned anything about this. I would imagine down south they do learn it. But a few days before we signed our Declaration of Independence, our soldiers down there fought off the British Navy, which I don't think has been defeated in battle. They left Boston willingly without a shot, but they left here defeated. And the casualties were something like 4-to-1, British casualties versus American casualties. They had to burn one of their ships in the harbor to prevent the Americans from getting it, and they left in defeat. So the victory here at Fort Sullivan, which was later changed to Fort Moultrie, kept the British out of Charleston for about another 4 years. Then during the Civil War, Fort Moultrie was one of the places where they fired on Fort Sumter. So, but that's not colonial, so we won't go there. But it only takes one bill to complete that collection, the 10 shilling of South Carolina in April of 1778. I only took out one bill to exemplify this, but a lot of the sayings and graphics on colonial bills are very political of the time period. You've all heard the saying, this is a bill from Virginia, Sic Semper Tyrannis, from when Lincoln was assassinated. And up above is a picture of victory with a sword in hand and a spear, standing on top of King George, who's fallen on the floor. He's holding regalia, his crown fell off, and he's holding a money bag where money's spilling out. Now, this bill was issued in 1777, and the war really was not going that good at the time. That's just a very brave or stupid thing to do at this period during the Revolutionary War. But there are a lot of bills you can collect different vignettes that have colonial or patriotic symbols or mottos on them. So I just brought the one Virginia bill for that purpose. New Jersey. I have a little more there because that's where I come from. Bill and I drove down here from Trenton. I would imagine most people here would like to specialize in the bills of their own colonies, of Delaware, or the colonies where your ancestors entered the United States. But here are two bills. This is a 15 shilling bill of 1763 and a 12 shilling bill of 1763. And some people like to collect mistakes. This one was printed in Woodbridge, New Jersey by James Parker. And this one was printed in Woodbridge, New Jersey by James Parker.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes they would put little errors or little things on a bill as their own marks to tell a counterfeit from a real one. They wouldn't do this. That's an outright mistake. Somebody just put in too many pieces of type there. So you can collect legitimate printing errors of colonial bills.
Are they more expensive than
No, they're the same price. This is a bill from February 1776. Again, it has a John Hart signature, signing the Declaration of Independence, and Samuel Howe. In order for a legitimate bill to circulate, you needed 3 signatures. Samuel Tucker, his signature was needed in order to make this legitimate. There were 2 state treasurers at the time. Each of them had half of the state treasury, and each of the treasurers would be the final signature to make it legitimate. This bill with 2 signatures, this was captured by the British Army. This actual bill, along with others, was captured by the British Army at the Avid farm, just a couple miles from my house. And I could probably make a half-hour talk out of the happenings there, but essentially Samuel Tucker went to a pub in Trenton, approached John Abbott, asked him if he would hold and hide the state treasury at his farm as the British were coming to Trenton. Abbott agreed. The barmaid there overheard the conversation, and she was a loyalist. So as soon as the British got into Trenton, she squealed on them, and the next day Lieutenant Colonel Abercrombie sent an officer, Hackshaw, I think his name was, and 20 troops on a 5-mile march to the farm. They found half of the treasury, the half that did not have the 3rd signature, which was hidden in the attic. The part that had all 3 signatures was hidden in the basement, and they did not discover that. I wrote an article about this, and before I put things, I can say anything here and deny it, nobody knows any different unless it's being recorded. But if you put it in print, it's there for God and everybody to see forever. So whenever I write something, I always ask somebody I respect to read it for me. So I asked David Gladfelter, Eric Goldstein from Colonial Williamsburg, Eric Newman to read my article, and Eric Goldstein came back from Colonial Williamsburg and said, Ray, there could be a lot of reasons why there's only 2 signatures on this bill. It doesn't necessarily mean that the British captured it. You need contemporary evidence. And that took the wind out of my sails, especially after I paid a few dollars for this. So I contacted the British Army. They were no help whatsoever. I bought a book, General Howe's adjutant, von Munchausen. He wrote like a daily diary of everything that was happening as the troops crossed New Jersey. And I spent a lot of money on the book, nothing about this. And then a friend of mine gifted me a set of New Jersey State Archives that had nothing but newspaper articles about New Jersey from 1703 until 1783. And to my wife's delight, those still reside in our bedroom. And on her bookshelf. And I pulled a volume out which had newspaper articles from February 1777. I opened it up, and I read this in the Pennsylvania Gazette that warning, do not accept any bills from the state of New Jersey having only 2 signatures, those of John Hart and Samuel Howe. They were captured by the enemy. They were the property of the state. They were not legal to tender. And I jumped out of bed. I thought I was having a heart attack. I can't call anybody at 11:30 at night. But and the next morning, Eric Goldstein from Williamsburg said, congratulations, Ray, you have your evidence. So this was local history for me, the capturing of the state treasury near my house. This is just a pretty bill. It's a 6-pound bill. State of New Jersey, 1776. These command a little bit of a premium because they're called the Rittenhouse Bill. And I'll see if I can zoom in with the camera. I'm sure I can. If you look at the little basket in the center there, right around the rim of the basket, you can see Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse. And I don't know how it came about, but it's common acceptance that this was order devices that were engraved and made by David Rittenhouse. He did a lot of clock work and engraving work, and the rest of the Rittenhouse family were paper makers, and he was the only one we can think of in Philadelphia or in the area at the time who could have done something like this. So this is popularly called the Rittenhouse Bill. And again, this has blue and red ink on the front and black in the back.
Why does it say 10 pounds across the top border there too? Isn't it a 6 pounds? But look along that edge where you said Rittenhouse was just written. Zoom in.
No, it says 6
Oh, it
on
does
the
say
far
6,
left.
6 pounds, okay.
Okay,
All I saw was the X, it looked like 10 pounds.
Yes. Yeah, they try to make these border devices elaborate and difficult to duplicate to try to eliminate counterfeiting. And counterfeiting was a big problem.
Let's make it into a 20.
Let's see if I can. This is a sheet. I don't know how many of you have colonial paper money. Let's see if I can. Okay, this little spreadsheet right here gives all the dates on the left of Continental Currency authorizations, and along the top is the denominations that were authorized. And for everything that was authorized, there's a little box with a number, and that number tells you how many were authorized to be printed in thousands. So like there were 600,000 1/6 of a dollar bill issued in February of 1776. So for those 4 fractional bills, they made 2,400,000 bills. But if you look through here, all the areas where they're highlighted in green, it looks better on the paper than it does on the screen. But those are known counterfeits of that date. So there's legitimate ones and counterfeits. And if anybody wants the spreadsheet, they can email me and I'd be happy to send it. I use it in my wallet. What I do is I change the color of the lettering to red for the bills that I have. This way I don't go to a show and buy something I already have back home. And my memory only gets worse with age. But if anybody wants this, just email me. The officers know how to get in touch with me. I'd be happy to send it to you. And one thing that I didn't do last night, okay, a few more minutes. How many of you have ever seen a real Continental Dollar coin? Okay, for those of you that haven't, you're not going to see it tonight. This is a reproduction, strictly for educational purposes. Those of you that are A&A members, if you remember in the January issue of the Numismatics this year and the July issue, they pretty much proved to me, in my mind, that the Continental Dollar had nothing to do with the Continental Congress, that it wasn't a prototype, it wasn't authorized by Congress, it wasn't submitted to Congress for consideration. And the thing that really came across to me, if I can make this readable, Sophia Banks had a massive collection, like 9,000 items that her estate donated to the British Museum, and she was very meticulous in her notebooks. And in her notebook at the top there, it didn't print out that well, she said that this dollar was made in Europe for sale in America. And she bought one, and with hers came this little advertisement, printed up, these American medals at 6 pence a piece. So back in the day in England, in the 1780s or whenever it was, you could buy these for 6 pence a piece. They were medals. And then it goes on to explain the meaning of everything in the design. Yeah, this is a photocopy of a printout from a page. But essentially, this advertisement showing that they were for sale in England at the time for 6 pence a piece pretty much proves to me, along with the rest of the information in the article, that the Continental Dollar is really not what we thought or hoped it was over the years. And those articles were by Eric Goldstein and David McCarthy. In January, it's just Eric Goldstein. In July. But don't lose hope, because there is a Continental Dollar. This is a Continental Dollar. $1 issued by the Continental Congress, authorized November 1775. There are actually 5 different issue dates. November 75, May 75, February 76, May 76, and the last one was January 79.
What happened to 77 and 78?
Well, I don't know for certain, but if you looked at that little chart earlier, well, you can see here that with 2,400,000 fractional bills and approximately 400,000 $1 bills already issued, then from July of 76 to September of 78, doesn't look as though they had a need for them, because they already had enough small money in circulation. plus they needed money, and it was more economical to, it cost them the same amount of money to print a well, they didn't make a $10 bill, I don't know why, but it cost them the same amount of money to print a $20 bill as it did a $1 bill. So it's probably a combination of economics and need that decided that. So it's not, the $1 bills are a little on the pricey side, but not unobtainable for somebody with an interest. You won't get divorced over it. And I'm still happily married, 32 years. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you, besides the Continental money, which I didn't share last night, was a couple of Delaware bills. And these are about as good as they're going to come. You won't find these much better. This is a 2-pound bill of 1760. 2 pounds is also 40 shillings, printed by Franklin and Hall. And if you look at the top, 2 pounds, the D is backwards. In Philadelphia, it was discovered 3 printing blocks. 2 of them were border devices, and 1 of them was a nature print of Ben Franklin's design. This top section here is one of those 2 border devices that is found, and it's located at the Library Company of Philadelphia, in Philadelphia. The Library Company of Philadelphia was established by Ben Franklin in 1731 and continues strong to this date. I was able to go there and actually look at those items. The other is a 10-shilling bill of 1759. And up at the top, you can see SHI, which is where the legend truncated for 10 shillings. And that border device along the top is also known to exist. So I'm still looking for the Delaware bill with the nature print that matches the nature print that's at the Library Company of Philadelphia. And I've only seen a couple, and they're in private collections, which I don't think that I can access. But I keep my eyes open, one may come up, because these aren't pretty, and still, they get about $400 a piece for them in this ratty-looking condition. And that covers what I was going to cover tonight. Now, do we have any questions? Yes?
Could you explain how the nature prints, how do they transfer the image of the leaf onto a printing plate?
Okay, there's a woman at Bryn Mawr College, Jessica Linker, and I visited her because she was the one, I believe, that actually matched the printing blocks to which specific notes they went with. And she's doing a paper on that, and she's also done experimentation. It appears as though they took the leaf and somehow pressed it into plaster, or something like plaster, and then poured lead on it to make the printing block. Now, the lead isn't the soft lead that you think of. It's a lead alloy for printing type that's stronger. It doesn't crush after 20 or 30 uses. So it's something similar to that process that made the nature print. But nobody at the time could duplicate it, and I think it would be fun to give it a try. I'm retiring in December, finally, and maybe in this upcoming year I might try to give it a shot. Other questions? Yes?
How hard is it to get a Franklin note, and how rare are they?
They aren't that rare. If you're willing to settle for something that is well worn, it's still every bit as historical. It just served the purpose for which it was made. You could probably get one for $300, $400, something like that.
Are you asking about a Franklin printed note or a Franklin signed note?
Well, that's a Franklin and Hall. If you want to get printed by Ben Franklin without Hall being a partner, it's going to be pricey. It's going to be older, and I believe that would only be Philadelphia and New Jersey, not Delaware.
So that would be expensive, but the one with the hole on it is not.
Right, Franklin and Hall is economical. Other questions? Yes.
How were the signatures put onto those notes?
They were all done by hand with the quill pen. The people were contracted and paid a specific amount of money, and in the contract, the ones I've seen, it stated that it had to be legible signatures. They couldn't just do like physicians do nowadays. It had to be a legible signature.
So out of those 600,000,
They were all hand signed. Now, for the Continental Congress,
Yeah.
you know, for every emission, they may have had like 30, 40, 50 different people to sign. It wasn't just 2 or 3 people signing all that. They'd all have carpal tunnel syndrome,
Yeah.
if that existed back then. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, two-part question, I hope not too hard to answer. What was the attitude of the pre-independence time British government towards the colonies issuing their own currency?
They were not happy.
They were not happy, okay.
Actually, there were some edicts passed out. I have a couple originals at home where the Crown wanted them to stop printing bills and to let the ones out there be called in at their due dates and print no more. But then I guess there were lawyers at the time, like there are nowadays, that figured loopholes around this. And as it approached the Revolutionary War, they just didn't care anymore. You know, in '75 and later, they just printed what they needed.
Okay, second part of the question, you probably already answered it, but did the British government in London have any control over how much currency the colonies, the pre-independence colonies, were able to issue?
Not really. They were aware of the legislations. To my knowledge, well, the state of New Jersey, I know, had they'd gone after approval to print a certain amount of money. I can't speak for the other colonies, and they delayed printing bills until they got an authorization from the king or from the government in England. And then it approached the Revolutionary War, and then in February of '76, they didn't care anymore, and they printed it anyway. But I know that, at least in New Jersey, they sought the approval of the British government for certain amounts of money.
Who would hold the money to back these bills up?
There was no money to back the bills.
So they could print as much as they wanted and still not have the currency really to...
Well, not the upfront currency. A lot of times what they did is they backed the bill with land purchases. So by selling land, import taxes, you know, states with big ports like Boston, Connecticut, Philadelphia, New York, they could get a lot of import duties. But states like Delaware and New Jersey with tiny ports, they didn't have that. So all they had was land sales. Once the Revolutionary War started, you also had the sales of property of Tories and Loyalists. So as those guys fled, their properties were sold, auctioned off, and that was to be used for a backing.
But if somebody turned in a bill and they actually wanted the silver or gold, they would have to be honored, or?
It depended on the time period and the colony. The Continental Currency, the first year it was issued, was pretty much on par with silver and gold. But as the war kept going, the amount of hard cash you could get per denomination dwindled and dwindled to the point where it was like you'd get $1 of silver for $100 face value in Continental currency.
Okay.
Other questions?
Early inflation.
I'm a big fan of the A&A. If you didn't notice, I'm sure you've seen some people here wear these fancy red shirts. I'm an A&A district representative for New Jersey. Kenny and Kenny are representatives here, and the Stitleys too. It's amazing what I'll do for free clothing. But I'm a big fan of the A&A and what they do, the resources. You can borrow books from the library, education, wine programs, summer seminars, conventions. If you're not an A&A member, think about becoming one. You'll enjoy the monthly journal. It adds so much to your hobby, and rather than just looking at the coins you have, learning about them and educating yourself is so much fun. Any last questions?
Ray,
Yes.
No, I was just gonna say, I think I still have a few free memberships, the ANA, if anybody's really interested in enjoying it, it'll give you a free membership and access to the web
Okay.
thing.
Well, if you could get a free membership,
have to-
here's your man.
You've got to pay the second time it
Yes.
comes around.
I also
I
have some
have-
brochures here. Well, these aren't brochures, they're just like educational pamphlets that tell you about colonial coins. And I'll leave them up here on a chair. You're welcome to take one if you like. And the C4 website is on the bottom there. I'm a member, not only am I a member, I'm a past president to the Colonial Coin Collectors Club. Great organization, as is EAC and every organization I'm a member of. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for having me.